Hey guys, I'm Sam Crack, and whether you're into this clapped out, flood totaled E46 M3 or hate it because it's not a Toyota Celica, this is an ideal car for anyone looking to jump into the DIY project car scene. I don't need to convince the BMW fans out there about the E46 platform. It's quite simple by today's German standards. It's easily customizable, and the aftermarket parts are plentiful. The M3 is at the top of the food chain, which makes it the most desirable of this generation. But for the less than impressed out there, consider this. This M3 was ridiculously cheap, quite possibly the cheapest on today's market. The prices of these cars continue to rise, and a coupe manual model like the one we have here is by far the most sought after. Junk cars that have been in major accidents sell for around the same amount that I paid for this one. So if we're able to fix this car's mystery electrical failure, there's a high probability of being able to double our money. If not, we're looking at a $5,000 paperweight. So let's start tearing things down and figure out what's exactly going on here. Huge thanks to Zach over at Ultimate Rebuilds. He came over to check out the M3. We discussed the paint and body situation in the front end, and he helped me tear everything down. So this front bumper, at first I thought maybe we could repair things, and no, that's not gonna happen at all. If you look really close up here, this is all fiberglass with like body fill over it. This bumper's been repaired once before. It's in really rough shape, and originally I said that, well, it's no big deal because they make a lot of aftermarket parts for this car. This is a little bit wider than your standard E46. There is no aftermarket M3 bumper. We're gonna have to source something factory, whether it's a used one that we refinish or just a brand new OEM one, which I'm not even sure they still make. That could end up being costly, but everything else looks pretty straightforward. Something interesting here, this is a factory carbon fiber reinforcement bar. I'm guessing this was exclusive to the M3, and I'm wondering how much more it upped the production cost of this car and really how much weight savings you get out of it. But everything behind the bumper is really good considering what the bumper looks like. But none of the body stuff matters quite yet until we can nail down our electrical system problems. Our M3's charging system is completely dead. Now while the car will run, it won't run long enough for us to get it warmed up so we can hear it do this. For an inline V6, this thing sounds incredible, almost as good as my Raycon Everyday E25 wireless earbuds. And if the charging system worked as good as the Raycons, well, we'd be in business. You see, there's a little battery in this tiny little case that'll keep these charged all day long. It's no wonder Raycon is loved by celebrities like Snoop Dogg, Mike Tyson, and Melissa Etheridge. These are so much more than just a set of wireless earbuds. To me, they're a productivity tool. Look close at my time lapses. You'll notice I always have my Raycons in while I'm wrenching. It makes it super easy to make and take phone calls. Just tap once on the side, that answers the call, and the microphone and audio quality is outstanding. That's pretty clear that I love Raycon's Everyday E25s, and I think you will too, especially at an additional 15% off when you visit buyraycon.com/Sam Crack, or just click my link in the description box below. That's already off the low price that these are. They're half the price of the other boutique brands out there, so you're gonna get an incredible value on an incredible set of wireless earbuds, again, at buyraycon.com/Sam Crack. And I gotta give a huge thanks to Raycon for making my workflow much more efficient and for also sponsoring this video. Let me show you exactly what our issue is. I've went ahead and hooked up our multimeter in the trunk, and I replaced the battery that this car came with a known working battery. You can see this is from 9 of 2019. We've got our red hooked up to the positive, black hooked up to the negative. We're reading a little bit over 12 volts, and this is a 12 volt battery. But when you start things up, you can see voltage actually went down on the battery to 11.6. The voltage should jump up closer to 14. Now, to demonstrate how things should be working on a more reliable vehicle, we've got our Ford Super Duty here, 12.8 volts coming out of the battery with the car shut off. It's a very strong, healthy reading. Now our numbers should be, yeah, see, 14.3 volts. That's because the alternator is now spinning, it's operating, and it's actively charging the battery as the engine runs. So our goal here is to get the M3 to do what the Super Duty just did. When we crank the car over, we want the voltage to rise. The voltage dropped in the case of the M3 because when we cranked it over, that demanded power from the battery, and then the alternator is simply not charging it. If you leave the car running, between the engine management running and all your other electronics, it's just gonna drain that battery till it's dead and the car's gonna die. Now, one of the things I find strangest about our issue in particular, I want you to look up here when I start the car up. See the battery light right there? Anytime you have a failed charging system, that's exactly what that battery light is for. But as you notice, that battery light never came on, which means the car thinks it's okay. And these are the sorts of problems that can be very difficult to pinpoint, because a regular diagnostic scanner, you plug it into the car and it would tell you exactly if your battery light came on, why the battery light's on. In this case, we've got to figure it out ourselves, which can generally be some of the most time-consuming and sometimes really the most simple and easiest fixes. It also tells me that since it's not throwing that battery light, that the alternator is likely fine, because if the alternator was failed, say it had a bad voltage regulator, well, the computer would sense that and then throw the battery light. A pretty common reason these alternators fail is the voltage regulator, which is located inside of them. Now, this is the original alternator that came with the car. And if you'll notice, this is a generic auto parts store brand. Now, this was replaced a couple times, like I mentioned, by the previous owner and never fixed the problem. Now, when I mentioned this in the previous video, the comments section did criticize the previous owner a little bit for swapping their alternator a couple times, but it's not as crazy of an idea as you might think. In the BMW forums, there are reports that these remanufactured alternators use the original voltage regulators and that they just don't work sometimes out of the box, and there's people that have gone through a couple of them before they get a good one. Now, the most responsible thing to do is to take the alternator, which, like I said, I pulled it out of the car, and take it to the auto parts store. They do free bench testing on these, and they did test this one. It came back totally fine. But just to eliminate a possible simple failure, I went and I ordered a brand new Vallejo unit. It's the same one that would come on this car from BMW. I ordered it from FCP Euro. It does cost a little bit more than the one that you would get reman at the auto parts store, but it comes with a lifetime warranty, and you know it's brand new, which is really important. Now, I installed it, didn't make any difference, but again, at least we've eliminated one easy failure point while we continue to diagnose the system. Another quick thing I did when I got this car home initially, I put it up on the ground. I noticed it was saturated in oil all on the underside. That's not really abnormal for an old BMW, especially one that looks to be a bit neglected on the mechanical side. But there was a major ground strap on the passenger side, coated in oil. I took it off, I cleaned it all up, I reattached and I cleaned all the rest of the underside of the car, and that didn't make any difference either. Now, at this point, we're really running out of like simple diagnosis, except for really visual checks here in the engine bay. I did pull a shop manual, and I want to thank everybody for their really constructive comments in the last video, and even a couple people email me different help sections on this platform, so that is awesome. Please keep it up. One of the big things that I saw was that the wiring that runs to the back of this alternator runs all the way back underneath the intake manifold to the starter, and then comes up here, you'll notice, all the way over to this positive connector. This is where you would like jump start the car. The positive's there, the negative's right there, and then all of that is connected to the back of the car in the trunk. You saw the battery was in the back of the trunk. It's necessary at this point to do a very good visual inspection on everything involved in our power system. We'll pull this intake manifold off first, see if there's anything obvious under there, and then we'll make our way to the back of the car, make sure it's all cleaned, and then retest. Ooh, I see something. Check this connection out right here. If I can get the camera in there. Can you see that all right? You see how rough it looks all around? We've got that like corroded nut. I'm not sure if that black is burning around the wiring insulation. I got to get a closer look at the wiring itself, but That definitely looks suspect. Here, hold on, let me do one other thing. Oh yeah, look, it wiggles around too. That could easily give you an issue. Oh, there's corrosion all over the stud here. Let's see. Oh, look, it is. This is all, there's play in that. So I took the wires off of our starter. The front one here is all corroded. Now that could definitely cause a conduction issue. Not so sure about that. Our rusty hardware here, probably also not the culprit. What concerns me is the play in the starter solenoid here. Now I don't have a replacement starter, but that would be the easy solution here and the right solution. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this remaining hardware off of here. It just might be not tight. I mean, this whole entire thing was loose, and I'm really going to go with the fact that this is probably the stem of all of our issues. If you look, see this cable here, it runs back behind here through this bracket, and then remember I was talking earlier, it went to the back of the alternator. I think I called it a ground. It's actually a power wire. So a bad connection between this and the starter, which then leads ultimately to the battery in the trunk of the car, that would all very likely cause the alternator to not be able to charge the car. Now let me just show you this very quick before I put the intake manifold back. Look, putting some force on it, no play whatsoever. The nut that holds up against the stud was indeed loose, so I think there is no problem with the starter solenoid here. Just got loose connections galore. We cleaned all that up, we wire wheeled it. Let's throw this intake manifold on. I bet you this is gonna fix our problem. All right, let's go check. All right. Check it out. Well, I'm kind of in shock how simple our solution was, and it didn't cost us anything either. Usually you dig in, you find a bad part, and at least you're in a couple $100. The last time I had such a finicky electrical issue was on the Ferrari, and again, it was a particular issue. Somebody had swapped the ECU computers before I got it, and the car wasn't running right. In the case here, I'm pretty sure the previous owner dumped this car because the charging system failed and they just didn't want to go through the hassle of diagnosing it. So it's a good deal for us, and the fact that we haven't really put any real money into it yet to fix that problem is really ideal. Now I'm still kind of wondering, is that flood car related? All the corrosion, it definitely points to moisture getting in there. That loose stud though, maybe that's prior repair related. My guess is with 140,000 miles on it, the starter's probably been replaced in this car at least one time, and maybe the starter from the factory had that loose stud. Either way, we fixed it. It took maybe about an hour time, and I probably spent only a couple hours prior to that diagnosing things, as you saw. And just because we fixed the main issue doesn't mean the build is over yet. Obviously, we got to take care of the upfront cosmetics, and there are quite a few little stored codes in the car and a few little mechanical issues we got to take care of, and then some wear items that really need to be redone, like the suspension, the brakes, and then the wheels, something that you guys pointed out in the comment section of the last video. You guys were very quick to notice how awkward the wheel situation is on this car. Look at how tucked in the rears are and how far the fronts stick out. A lot of you are convinced that maybe the wheels are on backwards, because I would think from the factory that these would be a staggered setup. Some people said that maybe I have a square setup. This does have the spot where the BMW M emblem would sit right there. I would suspect that these are original wheels, just in really rough condition. And the other strange thing is actually those are a wider tire size than these, but they just look like a quick, cheap, used tire job. I mean, look, these are winter tires. So all of this is going to get scrapped for the time being. If they are indeed original M wheels, they might be worth saving, but to powder coat and refinish them all, be about $100 to $150 a wheel. So let me show you a quick solution to this wheel problem. Our 335 is going to help us solve our wheel dilemma. Now, if you're not familiar with this car, go ahead, check out the video above. This was given to me by a really nice guy named Scott. I absolutely love this car and the story that came with it. If I had to pick between keeping this or the M3, it's this car all day long. And again, just check out these wheels. They fit the car so perfectly, but we're gonna borrow the wheels off of this because I have the factory set of wheels for it. We're gonna swap them temporarily, but this car will always be on a set of bronze Koenig ampliforms. These wheels will fit the M3 perfect. The offsets are right, the sizes are right, and they got fresh rubber on them, so they'll work very well. If the bronze looks good on the red paint, we'll leave them on the M3, but temporarily it will help us test the suspension, brakes, everything that we modify or upgrade on the M3, and maybe permanently depending on how they look. Now, a bunch of you guys have been asking about this car. Quick update. If you remember during the exhaust modifications, the O2 sensors were damaged. I have all new O2 sensors and a new set of cap pipes, but since this is an X-Drive, the front diff and a cross member is all in the way of doing that job. On the ground, it's impossible. I tried it, so we're gonna get it up on a lift, hopefully very soon, and we're gonna take care of it. So with the downpipes installed, that will make this a full bolt-on car. It will be very quick, I'd say north of 400 horsepower, and it will keep it decently reliable without starting to modify the fuel system or the turbos or anything like that. Since our main issue didn't really cost us anything and all the other stuff that I've diagnosed to be wrong on this car isn't super involved, we are on track to have an E46 M3 that's a coupe with a manual transmission well under 10 grand, and in today's market, that's incredible. And that's a pretty well sorted car because we're gonna do a lot more mechanical repair to make this car right. So if you like this sort of build where there's some technical diagnosis and repair to go along with it, make sure you're subscribed at the link down below. And if you're not already following me on Instagram, I've been posting photos of the build as we progress before anything goes live here on YouTube. Now guys, none of this would be possible if you weren't watching, so I gotta give a huge thanks to each and every one of you for watching today. I'll catch you very soon.